yeah, maybe I'll start getting products for free, or someone will pay me to advertise something, maybe. But, I was doing it just to see what will happen with it. And all of a sudden, somebody reached out to me to learn with me. And then I was like, oh, I can actually be a teacher and use the platform to teach.
Welcome back to the one and only Jewish personal branding podcast, Schmoozers. I am David Cobby, and today I'm excited to present to you a guest that is known for her ability to teach. Before I introduce her, I want to give a big thank you to everybody listening to this week's episode. Don't forget to send an episode to a friend or family member so they too can also hear about the personal brands of many proud Jews. My next guest is not your standard Hebrew or Judaica teacher. She's not going to bore you nor make you take an exam on all the different tenses in Hebrew. While amassing over 25,000 followers on Instagram, she has managed to produce insightful and engaging content that teaches her viewers the most important topics surrounding Judaism. She also has helped many non-Jews throughout their conversion processes, including her husband. Please welcome to this week's episode, Netta Asner. Netta, how has your day been so far?
Been very good. And I think honestly, you're catching me at the end of my day. So it's a nice highlight to the end of my day.
I like that. So Netta, everybody teaches, we'll tell you a lot about her in a second, but Netta teaches a Hebrew class that just started, and she had her first class, I think, on Sunday, right?
Correct. Yeah. As I was going to just say, I usually teach one-on-one Hebrew, and this is my first time doing a group course via people from Instagram. So I previously was an Israeli emissary and taught adults their Hebrew. And now I actually got, 11 adults from my Instagram to learn with me. And that was really amazing.
That's awesome. And I feel like everybody needs to learn a little bit of Hebrew. I mean, I for one, haven't taken Hebrew and God knows how long. Like Duolingo doesn't really do it for me. Like, it's like, oh, you're sitting on your phone. It's like a game.
It's like a game. And also, you really don't get the vocabulary you're supposed to get from if you actually want to speak the language. I will say, though, that I teach for Hebrew prayers and blessings. So it's a little bit different. So I tell people you're not going to speak Hebrew, but you're going to be able to read the prayers and understand a little bit more than you did beforehand. Kind of like highlighting key words so that the actual prayers and blessings have meaning.
Okay. Very, very innovative way of learning Hebrew. Obviously a big part of Judaism is Hebrew, learning the language. And I want to get into a little bit about your Jewish geography profile, Netta. Are you ready to get into your Jewish geography profile?
Let's go for it. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So where in Israel do you live? This is a two-part question. Where in Israel do you live? And before moving to Israel, where did you live?
So I live now in Jerusalem, and I've lived in Jerusalem basically since 2004 when I moved with my family, as a kid. And beforehand, I lived in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Love Maryland. Silver Spring is a great area. I'm sure we know a million people in common in Silver Spring. We could play the actual Jewish geography for millions of years. But
yes, so I was an Israeli emissary in Rockville, Maryland. So I actually know people relatively recently. So even more so. Yeah.
Yes. It's we're all connected, especially when you know a Maryland Jew. You know everybody. That's what I learned moving to Maryland. That's what I learned. Netta, what is one type of food you wish was kosher?
So this is not like a food, but I really would wish that meat and milk I could mix out. So I could get a cheeseburger, I could get a chicken parm. So it's not a food, but it's like I feel cheese with any kind of meat type thing would be something that I would want to try.
Okay. Let me ask you a follow-up question to that. So you've obviously in Israel and America, Israel does a better job of this. They have meat substitutes, right? So like the Beyond Burger, that stuff. But then there's also the dairy substitutes. So like, I think there's a brand called Daya or something that has like non-dairy cheese, whatever. Would you rather have a meat hamburger and non-dairy cheese or a fake meat hamburger and real cheese?
So now I would prefer the real burger and the fake cheese.
Good answer.
But I'm really curious what like they're talking about, creating like the meat in the lab and it's supposed to be from cells of animals, but it's part. So you could actually have cheese with that. What an interesting halachic question, right? But you can actually have cheese with this burger, even though it's made from an animal cell, but just because it's so not like an animal cell anymore, you can have it with actual cheese. And I'd be curious to have that and see if it's better than, the burger with the fake cheese.
Right. See, guys, I didn't even tell her to teach us anything, and we're already learning here. This is awesome stuff, and we got so much more learning to do. Final question to your Jewish geography profile. What is your favorite subject of Judaism to teach? I know it's probably a very hard question, but if you could give me, maybe one or two answers, what would it be?
So, in all honesty, my favorite thing when I'm teaching somebody one-on-one is actually guiding them on, what is the conversion process look like, which I guess, it's not a particular subject, but talking about what conversion to Judaism looks like. How do you immerse in a community? What are the requirements and expectations, but also like understanding that a person's personal situation can affect how things will happen. So that's one. And I guess the other one would be family purity, which I'm actually doing a session on mid-August.
Okay. Those are probably both topics that I've learned about in Judaica. Don't tell my teachers this, but I probably have forgotten all about them by now because I've graduated for 8-9 years. But I want to focus in on the conversion process in particular. And I know of many people that have converted to Judaism. And it's a very comprehensive process, depending on what type of conversion you do, whether it's a Reform conversion, Orthodox, whatever it is, they're very different and complex processes. But I want to talk about, a conversion that's very near and dear to your heart. As I alluded to earlier in your introduction, your husband, John, converted to Judaism, and you kind of helped him through that process. So why don't you talk a little bit about what that was like and, how that kind of made you appreciate and teach other people about the conversion process?
Amazing. So basically, John was on a trip to Israel. The trip was supposed to be, a political trip, and then we met. And we started talking. And basically, I told him that in order for us to actually start dating, you have to convert to Judaism. And his response was, I know. So I was very clear in my passion for Judaism that he knew right from the start that's what was going to happen. So I'll say that in his case, he was very lucky that he lived in Chicago. He lived in a place that was central, that there's multiple synagogues nearby, that there's a beit din. A beit din in Orthodoxy is a rabbinic council. For the other movements, they'll say the word beit din, but they basically mean 3 rabbis who are going to meet at the end of your conversion and just hear about your process. At the end of the day, for the other movements, you are converting through a particular synagogue with a particular rabbi, and that's your process. In Orthodoxy, you have a sponsor rabbi, and then you have the beit din, and the beit din is the one who approves your process and actually meets you whenever, but your process and your connection to people is through the community and through the sponsor rabbi. So you mentioned it beforehand, Jewish geography. I had a friend from the army who I served with, who was from that community in Chicago, and he connected us to the person who became John's sponsor rabbi. So I always tell people that if you have a connection, go for it, because it makes such a difference, because people all the time hear from random people. And if you have that connection, just helps you a few steps forward and shows that you're serious because you already have those connections. And he was in his final year of college, so he had a lot of time also. He would go every Shabbat and every holiday to the community. And it was a process, meaning, it's your upcoming Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the fast. It's a 25-hour fast, so we mourn the destruction of the temple. And it was the first thing he did in his process. He was working at the time in a non-kosher restaurant. And so he was like, yeah, I'm going for it because, I'm going to do the 25-hour fast. An hour before the fast ended, he was, serving food, and he all of a sudden thought, oh, I'm hungry, and popped something into his mouth. He thinks that it was, like a mac and cheese shrimp thing. Okay. Super not kosher. So it's a great story, but at the same time, it emphasizes the point that he fasted Tisha B'Av. He did this fast, but he also, broke it and whatever, and that's part of the process. So he wasn't keeping kosher, keeping Shabbat immediately, and you're actually not supposed to keep Shabbat fully as when you're in the conversion process. But I was on the other side of the world when he was going through this process. I was in Israel and he was in Chicago. So I was there to, guide him and everything, but he had had the families that he was hosted at on a weekly basis that really helped him a lot. And I guess I helped him with the Hebrew a little bit and reading and guiding and, stuff like that. But it really was his own process. So when I always get the comments of, oh, you converted for marriage, it's fake, I get so mad because I wasn't even there. I was on the other side of the world and he completely did this on his own. And if he wouldn't be able to do it if it was just for me, because he dedicated so much time and changed his life about what he eats and where he can go on Saturdays and Fridays and holidays, whatever. He missed family weddings for this. So, you really change a lot in your life in order to make this and live this lifestyle for real. It took him about a year, which is actually relatively short compared to other Orthodox conversions. But I've spoken to over 120 people who have been through a process, and I've heard so many stories that there really are no rules, and it really depends on your community, your rabbi, your personal situation. Like here, for example, somebody who has just a Jewish father, and she was really immersed in an Orthodox community. It took her 3 months because it was just like a check. But other people I know, I spoke to a couple recently, and they've been doing this process for 5 years, and just because of things that have happened that have delayed it. It's, happens.
Wow. I was just going to say, the people that are criticizing him for joining Judaism, my initial first reaction is John, what are you doing? Why are you converting to Judaism? This religion is not for the weak. I mean, it seems like he's enjoying his Jewish journey now. And, I think you definitely assisted him throughout the conversion process. But I think another big thing, like you mentioned, is being entrenched in the community. And, I think that's a very big part of it is learning from Judaism doesn't happen, outside of a bubble, right? Yeah, sure. You can learn with Netta on Instagram and learn the little tidbits or whatever, but really learning about Judaism happens inside of a community. You get to understand the dynamics of a Jewish community. Those are always really fun to assess. Being a fly on the wall during if you're at shul and you just hear people's conversations about other people in the community, it's the best thing in the world. It's I think I was talking about this on another episode. The Jewish gossip is off the charts. People love to talk about, the little things and whatever. But
it's funny that you're saying that because there was one family we would go to regularly from Chicago, and he banned the shul for whatever reason. It was a known thing. And he was the banning is still on. And it was a joke every time he arrived. So when you said that, I immediately thought about it. I was yes, the gossip is
the gossip is real. I do want to go back to your, you mentioned that you had this connection through the IDF, one of your friends with the IDF. I want to talk about your IDF experience. So you were in the IDF from 2014 to 2016, and you worked with the spokesperson unit. So we think of the IDF, right? Combat, maybe engineering, but no, you decided to work with, the people that would talk to North American media outlets. So how did you end up in this spokesperson unit role as opposed to a combat role, a quote unquote typical IDF soldier would?
So I'll just say that for women, combat roles are, you have to volunteer for them. Meaning, even if I was in the best physical shape, they won't put me in a combat unit unless I want to specifically. That the men can express that they don't want to be in a combat unit, but usually if they are physically fit, they'll be put in a combat unit. So that's just the difference. There's a lot of the options for women that have to do with being teachers of various things, but it could be teachers of combat things also. And intelligence is a big one, a lot of education stuff in general. So I got to the spokesperson's unit pretty much by chance. I got a text saying that I had, the relevant scores in order to even apply. And then I got into the unit. And I'll just say, I think I was the only religious girl in the whole course. So it's a unit that's very much known for, people from Tel Aviv and very, well off, and they have connections because they want to get into media and news afterwards. So people ask me, even up until this day, they ask me, so how did you get in? Like, what connections did you have? And I'm like, none. I don't know anyone. My parents are much older. Like I didn't know anybody. So I'm not trying to like say I'm incredible. I just think that there's this just stigma, and over time it has changed about how you actually get in. How I also got into North American media is also by chance because they just had an availability, and I was the person who fit from the course, and then I was brought into it there specifically. So I was very lucky. I started my service April 2014, and the war, Operation Protective Edge, started in July 2014, and the I forgot what it's called, Brother's Keeper was when the 3 boys disappeared. That was in June. So I was in the spokesperson's course during that time. And then like the war broke out, and I started my actual active service in the middle of the war, answering reporters from all over the world, their questions. And I mean, I was telling somebody recently that I'll never forget, like that I had to answer secret phone because they were giving me certain information about what is the status of this and that, but I had to then transform it into something that I could share with the public afterwards. So it's something that I'll never forget because, at the time of the war, you're constantly trying to be like now as well, that we are trying to always have the information out first and, be correct, but also like beat the media war. So it was a very powerful time. And that's like, it was an operation. Now we're in a war, but it's the biggest thing that's like happened, since now. So it was a very, very interesting experience. But I'll just say in general that the work that we did was basically that our unit connects between reporters to the IDF. A reporter cannot just like walk to a base. So what they do is that they contact the spokesperson's unit, and then we also answer their questions. If they have a particular request, they want to speak to an intelligence officer or go see a drill of some kind, something like that, then the unit would bring them to do that. And the biggest thing that we tried to do was basically share ideas, that we would try to lead the conversation, if there's anything that we want to bring forth, that we want reporters to share and talk about in the media, to really initiate that ourselves and try to find the most interesting way in order to do that. And that's also by personal relationships with the reporters, but also really trying to find in the field itself the interesting new things that are happening that would be of interest to American and Canadian media. So I've seen, things from all over. I was in a Hamas tunnel also with like CNN, also an airplane simulator with CNN. Went up north to Majid al-Shams with ABC. So like really cool stuff. But sometimes it was just like, off the record briefing, right? But it's still like I get exposed to this intelligence information that's later hopefully going to become an article. So that's the idea. It was a very, very cool job. And I did it for 2 years.
Wow. People talk about the IDF being, all combat, blah, 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 because that's what you hear in the media now, right? Everybody's focused on the combat stuff. But, the communication aspect of it is also very fascinating, right? We talk about, misinformation and all this stuff that's being floating around about, not just the IDF, but everything in general. And surrounding Israel, surrounding, other countries as well. But it's very interesting that like the communication roles within the IDF, those kind of get swept under the rug, right? You guys are the ones really doing, the dirty work and making sure that the reporting is actually accurate. And, you mentioned building relationships with the other news reporters and news stations. And I think that's a very big thing now, considering how much, if there was a media war, it would be, I would say right now, between, all these different media outlets and who's picking what side, who's picking that side to gain viewership. And it's the whole dynamic behind that is is super interesting. But another part of this relationship aspect that I want to get into within your career is you also at post IDF, you have the opportunity to work at the Knesset as a tour guide, which I think is another, you work at the IDF and you work at the Knesset, like, well, what more can you do in Israel? Still make a startup business? Like, you almost have the trifecta. Those two experiences seem unbelievable. And I want you to kind of talk about your experience with the Knesset and how, maybe that differed from the relationships you built as an IDF working with the spokesperson unit. How did the relationships you built at the Knesset, help you advance in your career and maybe even understand like what your purpose was in life?
Wow. An interesting question, like way to put it. So I'll just say, it sounds very impressive. The job of the Knesset is a student job. So meaning you can only be a student in order to get it. And it's a tour guide. So what was amazing is that we led tours in a variety of different languages, English, French, German, Amharic, which is the Ethiopian language, Arabic, and did I say German also? I said German as well. Okay. So and Spanish. Didn't say Spanish. I knew there was another one. So you have people from all around the world who Russian too. People from all over the world who are students who move to Israel, whatever, and then they're able to just lead tours to tourists. So fun fact, when the Knesset is in session, you can come to free tours on Sunday and Thursday. If it's the same, then it's 8, 12, and 2. You just come in, bring your passport, and you can, go on a tour for free by somebody who was like myself, who would be giving tour in the central stations. So I didn't really have much contact with, the members of Knesset or stuff like that, but you're in the building. You're very much aware of the new bills that are going up and happening. You're very much aware of like who's in the building more. There's always like this joke about a former member of Knesset who comes to use the gym. Okay, so like, because they're allowed to, they can go to the gym for free. But I'm talking about stuff like that. So I don't think I had like a personal relationship, but just being so close to Israel's democracy was very, very fascinating, especially because that was the beginning of a time where there were like a million elections, one after the other. So it was the beginning of that time. And fun fact, it was 50 years for the Knesset, and they did a special project, and it happened literally once that I was sent by the Knesset with 4 other people to communities abroad to teach about the Knesset. So I went to Toronto, but people went all over the world. But it was a really cool experience to actually be representing Israel's democracy and sharing about that and talking about that to a community abroad, which I think that is very connected to what I do today. Speaking to tourists about Israel and sharing about my life and knowing how to talk about it in a way that's interesting and relatable. That's what I think would the connection be.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting how you go from work, being in the IDF, right? Because so when you move to Israel, you have mandatory service, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I will know asterisks that as a religious girl can say I'm religious and then not do anything. But usually what's common is that she does like a girl would do national service. Right. But yes, it is mandatory. I chose to do military service. Okay. Yes.
Right. So you go from the IDF to being a Knesset tour guide to now being one of the leading Jewish educators online, teaching about, like I mentioned, Hebrew, everything Judaic, Kala, all this stuff that's like super important for Jewish people to know and even non-Jews to know just about the religion so you could get a full picture of it. How did you start doing this kind of like learning, teaching stuff online? And when did that start, that initial point where you were like, okay, I'm going to start posting these videos online and trying to like get the word out there essentially about Judaism?
So I'll just say that the stepping stone in between the Knesset and the Instagram page is my shlichut, like being an Israeli emissary. Through that, I was in a particular synagogue, a particular community that I'm teaching about Israel and learning, like, how do I share about it? And I share about a lot of different things, including also during the time, the show Unorthodox came out on Netflix. And then I did a session for my synagogue talking about the religious practices behind unorthodox. And it was a few months after I got married, and I learned about the laws of mikveh and family purity and covering your hair and all those things. And I was like, the show, from my view, doesn't represent that. So for my synagogue, I brought people from different denominations and talked about different like women subjects, and it was only for women. And over 100 women came to each session, which was like crazy. But I also add, it was COVID, which brings to the next part of your question. How did I start this? It was a COVID thing. Like I would like so many people who started sourdough or challah baking, which I started the challah baking too. I started an Instagram page, and originally I wanted to be our Jewish life. So I wanted to share about me and John, and then I realized he wasn't interested in being on Instagram at all. But every now and then he is willing to do stuff with me, or that he has in mind that I like film him and, you know, do something with him. So one of our like most successful posts of us doing like the trend of like the battling thing, he agreed to do it with me. If you know what I'm talking about, it's fine. It's really like not a big deal, but I'm just saying he agreed to do stuff with me, but he won't be in the front. And so that was the original idea. And I want to talk about the unique things of our life. And then just ended up being that I wanted to share more about Judaism in general. And I've been doing this almost for 4 years. Started in November 2020. So, you know, November 2024 will be 4 years. And, you know, you learn how to do things that are actually interesting, and what's actually interesting, and the little tidbits that people want to know. And it's only a year after I started my page that somebody actually reached out to me to learn with me. Maybe I'll start getting products for free, or someone will pay me to advertise something, maybe. But, you know, I was doing it just to see what will happen with it. And all of a sudden somebody reached out to me to learn with me. And then I was like, oh, you know, I can actually be a teacher and use the platform to teach. And the conversion consultant also like just happened by chance. So it was really just about posting, you know, things that I thought that might be interesting, and then people came to me. And now we're in a place where like I'm thinking about what is interesting and offering stuff, which is, you know, through an ebook, through a course. But yeah, things evolve. When I started in 2020, Reels were just starting. So it was like, how do you do Reels? What are you supposed to do? Like now it's very obvious with like always have captions and have maybe like the trending music also and everything. Like nobody knew what was going on.
Yes, it was a very disruptive time for social media. I mean, COVID, I feel like everybody kind of shifted gears in one way or another. But I just want to say, like, the content that you post is super engaging, and it's not, you know, for me personally, like I obviously love Judaism. Was I, you know, as a kid, did I like learning about Judaism? Not so much. Like, you know, I'd sit through some Judaica classes and I'd be like, why am I here right now? Like, I want to go, you know, outside for recess or whatever. And there's just, you know, it's very hard, especially for like a young, you know, child, you know, around bar mitzvah age to learn about Judaism. But I just think your content is so engaging, and you have like some sort of magical power which allows you to create your content to be so exciting, because some of the stuff is like super useful. Like today, for example, I watched your video on what the Magen David actually meant and like the story behind it. And my name's David, right? You think, oh, I know what the Magen David is. If you told me yesterday that it was meant as a symbol of a shield, like I would be like, oh, really? Like I had no idea. But seriously, like the content you come up with is so engaging, and it really, I think you do a very good job, clearly, of capturing your audiences. So what kind of goes into the creativity behind it, and how do you make your content so engaging so that people are not only entertained, but they're also learning?
First of all, thank you so much. I appreciate it, because, you know, with social media, unless you get a comment or a DM, you're like just putting stuff out there and you're hoping that it's interesting to someone. So you get a few likes, or like, you know, it could be like my dad and all of his friends maybe liking it. I don't look specifically, right. But, you know, here you're saying, oh, I saw it and it was engaging. So I appreciate that, first of all. And I'll just say, I think so I'm a crazy organized planning person. That's Netta. Um, and I first of all always look at the calendar and see what is happening around this time. So meaning I know that what's upcoming is Tisha B'Av, or the 3 weeks that we're in right now. And before you had the fast of the 17th of Tammuz. And then, we have Tu B'Av, which is the Jewish Valentine's Day. And then we're approaching Elul and the high holidays. So that would, first of all, guide me because I wanted to do things that are relevant. And then in addition, often what guides me is actually my students themselves and questions that they ask. Like I did recently a post about that you have to eat fish on Friday night. And it was because somebody who was converted was like, yeah, it's some family's house. And they said that you always have to have fish. And I was like, I don't know. Like I think this is a custom for sure, but I've never heard of this. So I did my research and then, I found out more about it. So obviously I don't know everything. Maybe it seems like I do, but I'm constantly learning as well from my students too. And that is often a source of inspiration. And I have my brain on at all times, to the point that now John's brain is on as well. We were at the car shop. They were repairing our car, and he like bumps my shoulder and like, take a picture of that. And it was a blessing of to bless the business. I posted it today or yesterday. So it's like always having your brain on for like something going on. Again, whether it's like an Israel thing or because I share also about my life here in Jerusalem and Israel with everything going on. Or just the small little tidbits of Jewish stuff that are happening. Just like for example, on Tuesday I was somewhere in Jerusalem, and they were doing like a market of like fruits and vegetables, and it was from the south. So I just immediately filmed it, and I'm gonna do a reel about that. But yeah, that's more Israel related, but just means that constantly having that part of my brain on, so that if I see something, I know that it's going to be an idea for content. I mix that with trending sounds and doing short videos, or having something that is very clearly written out, and doing a mix and match of that. And often if it's too long or something that I think it's too heavy, then I won't do it. But when it's something that I find important, like somebody who follows me reached out and shared and asked the question of, if a baby boy passes away before it's circumcised, what do I do? So I told her, but then I was like, you know what? I think people should know about this. So I made a post about it as well. So I talk about the heavy stuff as well. And then that would obviously be a written post. But I really, try to do things that are like the little questions, so then you can do it in 60 seconds and have the brain space for that. Because at the end of the day, most of the people, I have 25,000 followers, but I don't have 25 million. So meaning there's a certain type of person out there who is interested in watching educational video for, a minute long, even that.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's so important to highlight how you interact with your followers, because I think it gives you a lot of good ideas. And, for me, feedback is everything, right? I do the show, not as much as like my stubborn Jewish self wants to do it in the ways that I want to do it. Like I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for other viewers too. And I think it's so important that, feedback you take into account, and, it gives you a content idea, which I think is just amazing, that entire process. I do want to talk a little bit more about, your interaction with your followers, maybe even the interactions with your non-Jewish followers. We talked about John's conversion. You help a lot of non-Jewish people convert to Judaism. But I do want to ask you a little bit about, maybe some of the overall comments you get from non-Jewish people, whether it's surrounding Israel, not surrounding Israel. How have your interactions since, I guess, October 7th been surrounding, how have your interactions been with non-Jewish people since October 7th? Can you kind of go into maybe some of the negatives that you've had, some of the positive interactions that you've had? Like, what has that been like since October 7th?
So I've been very lucky that there's like the first 2 weeks that were insane. And I thought that my whole life purpose was to be on social media and provide information for people. And then after 2 weeks, it like normal life came back. And I also think that everyone needed that as well. And I am, my original platform is not to be a political space. You know, like you said, I do Jewish education. So I then intertwine that with, you know, stuff that are going on in Israel. Like here, even for example, you know, a woman who's going to the mikveh and her husband is in reserve duty. Like, what does she do? Like, does she still go to the mikveh? And there's a special blessing that came out for her to say. So that way you are like intertwining Israel and Judaism as just one example. So I'll say there's two things. One, I constantly get anti-Semitic remarks for sure. People, especially if once a video goes viral, I will not look at the comments anymore. A video that has over, I don't know, 20K, okay? Look at the comments. I promise you'll see that they're wishing for my death. Something about genocide, something, and the video can be about anything. It can be about my in-laws. It can be about opening a fridge on Shabbat. And okay, like it doesn't matter what it's about. And the fact that it has the word Jewish in it, that's enough. So I just know to avoid it and ignore it. But on the other hand, I've had many, many more people who are so inspired to explore their Jewish journey, much more so now, and also be visibly Jewish. Literally here, that same post that you mentioned about the Magen David, somebody wrote, what do you think about a non-Jew wearing the Star of David? Now, some people, whatever, say appropriation, blah, blah. My opinion is that because it's not an obligation, it's not a mitzvah to wear the Star of David. It's become a symbol associated with the Jewish people. So basically by wearing it, you're saying, I support Jews and Israel. So if you are willing to wear that and know the consequences that come with that, then thank you. You know, that's my response to that. I know, again, there's a variety of opinions, but I've been blessed that I get a lot of more of those, and a lot of people who are interested in what conversion looks like. I'll say that, you know, I often have conversations, and it's not an easy process for sure. And so people are not. I will be truthful. You find a lot more people who would say are Jewish themselves or patrilineal Jews, something like that, or want to become more observant since October 7th, and then, you know, I have my life is the way it is. How do I make that happen now? So I'll still guide and recommend, and there's incredible and multiple ways you can strengthen your Jewish journey. But yeah, and then that's also actually why this past year I created an ebook called Roadmap to Your Jewish Journey, with the idea that it could be like, you know, a good first step for somebody who is just interested and doesn't know where to start, you know, to ask like 5 questions. What are the first 5 practices you can do for yourself, etc. So yeah.
Wow. I think it's so good that you're interacting with non-Jewish people, because it's so easy right now for whether you're a Jew or a Zionist to not interact with the other side. And obviously the ones that are making anti-Semitic remarks, like, for me, it's like, you know what? I'm not giving him even time of day. I don't know why people even bother to, you know, headbutt with somebody that clearly is anti-Semitic. Like, I don't even give them time of day because they don't deserve a platform. But the other part of it is like, we need to do a better job as a whole. We need to do a better job of interacting with non-Jewish people and people that maybe don't understand the Israel conflict as well. So it's good that you're really opening yourself up so that you'll answer questions from a non-Jew. And I think that kind of goes, you know, I could be being a little stereotypical here, but I feel like that's kind of against the norm of the Orthodox community even. Like, unfortunately, we really don't see a lot of, you know, mixing between the Orthodox community and even some of the, you know, the conservative reform communities, even in America. Like in my community, it's very sad. The Orthodox community is one community, the conservative reform community is another community. At the end of the day, we're all Jewish, but when it comes down to it, it's very rare that you find people celebrating Shabbat together, keeping kosher together, like all this stuff. So it's like, it's good that you're taking initiative to actually go out there, answer these people's questions, and not only for the purpose of converting, but also for the purpose of educating them and having them understand what Judaism really is. So I do want to go deeper into kind of your social media account, and I want you to kind of talk about like what sets you apart from other Hebrew/Jewish educators. There are, it seems like, millions of other accounts out there educating people on Judaism, Israel, Hebrew, whatever. But Netta, what sets you apart from the rest of the crowd on educating people about Judaism and Hebrew?
So I'll say one thing is that the conversion, I'm a conversion consultant, and just experience and firsthand with conversion definitely sets me apart. I find that often people who are within the Orthodox community themselves don't necessarily know the ins and outs of the process or what it entails, and they often, unfortunately, misguide people and provide incorrect information. So that's one. Two, I am non-Orthodox. I am, sitting here, and my hair, you can see my hair, and I have a cute little headband, and that's my very obvious way that I am non-Orthodox versus, other people who wear the wig and fully modest, etc. And they do an incredible job explaining about, more Orthodox lifestyle, but I give a different perspective because I am non-Orthodox. And the Orthodox part is a very important part to me, and I emphasize that I am non-Orthodox, and I am not as familiar with, other denominations, etc. But I think that gives sometimes people a little bit more, comfort level to share and open up to me, because I'm also, I share that I'm still in my journey as well. Ideally, I would fully cover my hair, but here I am. I'm walking around the world like this. I think that just makes me a little bit more approachable sometimes. Those are the two things that I would say. And I guess also another thing is that I am never, I'm always open to saying that I don't know and looking into it and then answering the question. Not saying that other people don't do that, but I think that really it's important for me to do that, say, oh, actually, I don't know that. I'm going to check and I'll get back to you. So to constantly be sharing that I am learning myself at the same time.
Modern Orthodoxy, I feel like, is a great middle ground for Judaism. I mean, I myself grew up modern Orthodox, and I think it gives me a lot of credibility even to do this podcast because I know how to, reach the, one end of the spectrum being, the Reform community versus the ultra-Orthodox Haredi community. Like, I, my entire life, have interacted with both communities, which I think is what all Jews should be doing, regardless of the whole idea of these labels of modern Orthodoxy, whatever. Obviously, yeah, we are both modern Orthodox, right? Because that's how we identify in the realm of the Jewish sphere. But really, when it comes down to it, we should all just be Jewish. I wish it was just we're all, just Jewish. It doesn't matter if we're wearing a black hat or you cover your hair with a sheitel, whatever it is. I personally don't like the labels. And I think, there's definitely, we feel like we have to be put in a box, and we feel like we have to be, in a certain category sometimes.
You said something, we should all be just Jewish. It's really funny that you said that because my seminar paper in my undergrad was about this whole subject of just Jewish, what it means to be just Jewish. I interviewed 10 people who define themselves that way, and they're not part of any other denomination. That's what they're called. And it was 18, 29-year-olds purposely. And my purpose was to actually check, what does it mean to be just Jewish? And I'll just say that it doesn't necessarily point out observance level, meaning you can be very observant, but just the idea that they don't identify with the three most known denominations, and that we can see the trend that people are going to be defining themselves more as just Jewish rather than anything else, because the labels don't fit young people today, or many young people today. So fun fact, and just side note to that, I very much calling myself modern Orthodox, and when I was in high school, I feel like I was embarrassed by being observant and Orthodox and everything, and now I very much like that title very much and embrace it fully. I did I shared a post that I bought a long skirt for the first time in my life. And because again, when I was in high school, the shorter your skirt, the cooler you are. You left the building of the high school, you would have jeans underneath and pull your skirt off and walk, from the gate with your jeans on. So it was like a defiant step. But, and I very much like being Orthodox and embracing that now. So yes, I understand the just Jewish piece. And I think it's important that we understand, what are the trends that are happening with our community, exactly what you said, so that we're catering, or that I'm catering, or that I'm talking to people from the whole spectrum and understanding actually who they are, rather than saying, which I get sometimes comments for, rather than saying dismissive things, rather than opening conversations, you're just saying dismissive things that you don't observe it correctly, or you don't, you're not a real Jew or whatever. Like Hashem will do that, not me.
I like that. Hashem will do that. I think it's going back to this whole conversation of just Jewish. I think there's a balance that you have to play, right? Because at the same time, right, when you're talking to somebody that has the perspective of like, okay, there's Orthodox conservative reform, you have to tell them that you're modern Orthodox, or else they might not invite you over for Shabbat dinner, or else they might not, eat in your kitchen or whatever. There are certain times where like I feel like I have to say, oh yeah, I am modern Orthodox. But it should be like what your paper is saying. It should be at the end of the day, just Jewish. Final question for you. Let's go into a little bit about, maybe the way that you promote yourself, right? So you obviously have an Instagram account, you have a newsletter, you have Hebrew teaching courses, and, a bunch of other ways that you promote yourself and kind of say like, here, I am Netta, I will teach you all about Judaism, and I will teach you all about Hebrew and whatever. So there's many different ways that people do this. Do you plan on adding any other new ways of promoting yourself, such as like other social media platforms? For example, I don't think you have a TikTok or I don't know, Facebook or whatever, or maybe even starting a podcast. Do you have any other plans in mind to like continue to add on to your promotion strategy of who you are as a person? Or do you think you'll continue to stick with what you have now before, maybe expanding?
Both. So yes, I want to expand, and I'll just say that my hope, my dream is to do this full time. That is my dream. So in order for that to happen, I cannot just stay in place. I have to always, move forward and think of new ways. At the same time, I do have a job now, and I have 2 girls that I have to think about at the same time. So it won't be tomorrow. Enjoy before marriage time, David, when you can like experiment and do stuff. Because I was like, if I started this in 2020 before my children, I would just like have done it for a year and see where it would go. But I can't do that now. But it's the plan to do so. So what I do want to expand is first of all creating more products so that there's more passive income as well. So creating a course, creating more ebooks and things that are relatable. I do want to expand to YouTube. Currently, I know TikTok is big and whatever, but with everything going on now until the current situation, the war is over, and that there's clearly ways that anti-Semitism is being addressed on this platform, I do not want to start a very clearly Jewish page on TikTok. That's me right now. But I feel like YouTube is very much fit to doing a long form thing that is my content. And, just finding additional ways that people can support me. So maybe doing something like a subscription of some kind that has, exclusive features and stuff like that I would provide for people who are continuously supporting me. But again, these are not things that are happening tomorrow, but definitely in the next year or so, because that you need to have multiple things in order to be actually doing this full time. So that's the hope. And I do a lot of one-on-one. That's the big thing that I do currently, in addition to courses. So doing more courses for sure, but, making it more clear that I do also one-on-one stuff too. I have regular students that I see about 10 a week, more or less. And, again, if I'm doing this full time, hopefully I'll be able to do more. But yeah, that's currently what I'm thinking.
Okay, awesome. I mean, you're already doing so much. So, just out of curiosity, I was wondering if you were looking to add on. This was a phenomenal episode. I learned so much. I hope all my viewers learned so much. Where can people find you on social media, across different platforms to learn about, maybe people that want to learn Hebrew, want to do a one-on-one with you? Where can people find out information on this?
So at Netta Asner, so it's ANETTA ASNER. There's literally only one of me in the world, which is a crazy thing to say, but it's true. I do have also a YouTube. I think that's my full name, Netta Asner Minster. So there'll be more content there soon. I do have a newsletter as well. So you can sign up via my Instagram to my newsletter. And there I also already do more long form content. It's bi-weekly. I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, make sure we're following Netta on Instagram. If you like some of the stuff that she talked about, subscribe to her newsletter. And I really want to thank Netta for coming on the show today. I want to thank all of you listeners for tuning in. If you like this episode, make sure, again, to share with a friend or a family member so that they can learn about Netta's personal brand and how she came from going from the IDF to now having a huge social media following on Instagram, doing all kinds of educational content related to Judaism. Until next time, keep schmoozing.